Today on the tabletop, I'll be talking about Earthborne Rangers from Earthborne Games. Earthborne Rangers is a cooperative game for 1 to 4 players, and it's a deck construction game that's built around a longer lasting campaign. And that aspect there of a campaign game, it's much similar to, I think about Arkham Horror, and also some of the campaign game expansions that you can get from Marvel Champions. And it's interesting, I think the card designers from Arkham Horror, part of that team ended up going over and working on this game here for Earthborne Rangers. And you can sort of tell there's, some aspects I think of the storyline and how things sort of play out in the environment and the game space. It seems to me it matches quite a bit with what is done with Arkham Horror. And the idea of maybe locations and cards that are set out like an encounter deck. And those aspects too are sort of similar also with Marvel Champions. Although I dare say, I think honestly, like the deck building is a little bit closer to Marvel Champions, and also I consider how cards are played too. That sort of borrows maybe a little bit more from Marvel Champions rather than with this game. But it's its own game in its own right, and I want to look at it a little bit more. So in the box, you're going to have lots and lots and lots of cards. And I really like the way that this is sort of set out. It's interesting too that they have quite a few card dividers are sort of included. And this is always nice. It's one thing that killed me a lot about Arkham Horror. It's a great game, love it. But gosh, man, you almost need to have some sort of card organizer to even play the game. There's so many different encounter sets and all these different things and how to get that information together and sort of parse that out for getting ready to play. So this is an exceedingly welcome addition to have that in this type of game. Also, in addition to this, you're going to sort of get a map, which is pretty cool, because all the locations of the valley that you end up exploring with your ranger. And of course, your rule book, pretty hefty rule book, pretty well done there. And also, they have here is this actual campaign itself they call The Lure of the Valley. And so this game, it's interesting. It's almost, I dare say, a little bit of some role-playing elements involved with it, but it's almost like a choose-your-adventure type game. And what you're going to be doing is you'll be spending 30 days playing out this game in this valley, sort of exploring around and trying to find different things to do and sort of interact with the denizens there and learn a little bit more about the valley and slowly get dragged into a little bit of a deeper story. So I'm going to go through a little bit more about this and how the game plays and then give out some thoughts about it. So the setting itself is rather interesting. It's a solar punk setting. The idea is that you've had this horrible environmental catastrophe. The world is almost in ruin, and it's just taken generations to slowly repair that damage to the environment. And it's changed society so much so that you're really living in more rural communities rather than these large industrialized areas. And there's technology that's out there, but it's rather fleeting. Individuals are more akin to using sustainable technology. They're trying to work a little bit more with nature than having an antagonistic relationship with it. So that's sort of the feel of it. And I think a great series that probably captures this quite a bit would be the Monk and Robot books. I think those books really capture the feel of this. So you have individuals that are more about exploring an area and sort of observing nature rather than being antagonistic and fighting against monsters and these sort of things. And there's fleeting uses of technology, but it's not like an overbearing part of that. So in a way, it's almost like fantasy thrown in with a little bit of sci-fi. The hardest thing starting out would be your ranger itself. And this is, I think, an interesting take of how you design your decks and how you design your cards itself. And one is that you have this ability card, and this really provides the foundation, the core of your character. And there's different attributes that you have: awareness, spirit, fitness, and focus. And typically they range between 1 to 3. There's an expansion out there that sort of alters that and throws it up a little bit, where you can get 4, 1 skill, but the other attributes will be lowers a value of 1. But this is a little bit more well-rounded, but you're going to have one that you're not too great at and another one that you'll be good at. And the idea here is that this sort of encompasses maybe the base things that your ranger can do. With an awareness of 2, it shows the idea that have a fair enough skill of sort of observing things in the environment, maybe trying to sneak by predators. That's what it can key into. As opposed to fitness, how well you can actually traverse terrain and explore. And so these represent like the amount of energy that you're going to have during a turn. So obviously you have a very low value in one, it's during a game turn, you're going to be very limited to what you can actually do with abilities that revolve around this. In addition to that, and this is what I think it sort of falls in line a little bit more with Marvel Champions, the way it decides your character, is that you can mix and match a little bit between your role and your background. And so these other cards you're going to have will be 30 cards that you fit into your deck. And the idea here is, of course, to first think about your role. What's the base thing that your ranger sort of does? Are they explorer, or are they more akin to working with other individuals? So they might be more of a conciliatory. So you'll have one ranger out of a couple types, and they'll have like a base ability they can use. And this is sort of like their background, their sort of their role of what they're able to do. And you'll have different cards that will fall along a specific role. And of course, also have background. Are they traders? Are they more artisans? What's the other things that they sort of do? And so those two pools of cards really sort of make up the bulk of your deck. And the idea in that aspect, I think what fits very well is, with Marvel Champions, you've got your base set, that's your actual character itself. And then you can pick out these different attributes, let's say like justice or aggression, these sort of things. And that can sort of modify how your deck plays. And that sort of has the same kind of thing here. In addition to that, you'll have these innate cards that sort of ideas that fits like your personality and what you can do. And so those three things really make up your deck. What's really clever about this too is that you can also pick out, one card basically from any deck at all. There's really basically no restrictions on that. So you can always just dabble in like, one special card and something else. And when I talk about cards too, what I want to stress is that deck building in that aspect is very simple, is that you can only have 2 cards of a single type. So when I say a card, really it means it's a pair of cards. And that's basically what you're going to be using to comprise your deck of 30 cards. In addition to that, when you're picking those out, is these cards will have here a requirement. Let's say this one says is 1 spirit. So I have to have a value of at least 1 to be able to add this card to my deck. So there are more powerful cards in this realm that might require 3 or 4. In that case there, I couldn't use this card. I couldn't have this as part of my deck. The cards themselves, they split between, let's say, gear. These are more abilities, so I could just use, 1 spirit energy to use this actual card. How this will basically work is if I want to try to do a test, I want to try to get over a target number, I'll spend a certain amount of energy, and then, let's say for a fitness test, you'll see a symbol here, and this symbol will match on this card. So I could use these cards and discard them to increase my ability for that. Then you're going to have what's called a challenge deck. And you'll pull out 1 card, and like I would say in Arkham Horror, when you're drawing out tokens, this is sort of what that does, is that will either impede you and lower the value of your check, or it might increase it. What I find about this is a bounded variable here. It's really at the lowest it's going to be is -2. Typically then you're only going to get up to +1. So you can sort of get a good idea of what you're going to draw. If you can get 1 more value than over your target number, this'll work out. And I like that idea that it's not so much an extreme that you'll automatically lose, but you can sort of mitigate quite a bit of luck. And of course, if it's successful, it's successful. If you fail, then there may be some repercussions, but that's generally what you're trying to use there. Now, what I want to stress about this is that you must use a token to do a certain action. So, during my turn, I can throw all in on my turn to try to do something. But in that case there, if I use up all my fitness then, for the rest of this game round, I can't do anything else with this test. I can't necessarily play these cards because this requires 2 fitness. And so you're really sort of balancing out, like, what do I need to do? How much can I squeeze out in this, 1 turn and doing some different actions, and before I just have to go ahead and call it just a little bit of time to stop and rest and replenish. And that choice around that is interesting because of how the cards play. Your cards sort of represent different general areas. And I want to stress out right now, the cards that I'm showing, by the way, really, they're not going to be any spoilers. When you're playing out the prologue, you're going to come across a lot of these cards anyway. So I want to stress right now, this isn't a spoiler. The cards that you see are going to be ones that you'll find out pretty early on. So how this game works out is you have your ranger and you're going to choose a specific location on the map that you're going to be starting out with and be traveling to. And so if I travel to, let's say, the Ancestors' Grove, it's going to dictate going through a certain path and a certain terrain type. What you're going to be creating is a deck that's going to have a location, and the terrain that you traverse through will have a small set of cards, typically about 12 cards. Depending on the location that you're at, if it's a location of some prominence, there'll be some non-player characters or maybe some key locations that'll get shuffled into this deck. If that's not around, you'll randomly draw from another subset of cards and throw those in that deck. And these will be like notable individuals that you'll come across. And if you interact with them, then you can sort of maybe get different quests or different missions, or, you know, they can sort of help guide you a little bit on your travels throughout the whole region. In addition to that, you're going to have weather. And weather is sort of dictated about what day you're at. So it's like basically starting out with a perfect day. You can have a downpour. You have some crazy storms. Your location and your weather will sort of dictate a larger area indicating the region that you're in. And then you'll also have things that you're going to probably encounter as you're sort of exploring this. Now, the key thing of this game is that it sort of works out, as I said, during a game day. So when I'm traversing to a location, I'm looking at it. First thing I want to try to do is explore this location. And you're going to have to get a certain amount of effort directed towards this. In this case here, it's 4 per ranger. I have only 1 per character, so I just need to get 4 on this here. And you're basically be using certain trace tests. In this example here, specifically would be a fit test, allows you to traverse, and I can explore a location and get some more awareness of it. So basically what I'm doing is in this region, I'm sort of tramping around and sort of seeing how the terrain is and sort of exploring a little bit. And when I've got to a point where I've explored this enough, then I can have the potential of maybe traveling elsewhere. So that's a key thing in this game that you sort of want to try doing. In addition to that, what they have are these different areas of play. And one is called Along the Way. Depending on what you're doing and how this is set up, you're going to have cards that are going to be closer, more in the region. So if I want to explore the region in its entirety, I'm going to have these cards that are going to be along the way. They're going to be along the trail. These are things that I'm going to sort of interact with. The next set of space that you're going to have will be cards that are within reach. And this is more within my immediate area. And so it's the interaction of these cards and like what I'm trying to do is going to impact my trait test. And then more importantly, this idea of how much I can do during a day. And this is what's rather clever about this. So in an aspect here, if I want to traverse this, if I want to interact with this card, I sort of look at the cards in between me, if they're within reach and along the way that are within this region here. And for the presence, each value they have here, in this case here being 1, this will increase the amount of fatigue, amount of effort that I have to do to make my check. So typically we'll have, to make a check, it will have a certain target number. In this case here, let's say for this environment, it's only 1. So I'm going to make a check here. I would have to spend, say, a 3 fitness. I'll make a check, flip over a card, and then it may adjust the value of that. And then whatever I have left over, that's how much I can generate and actually add to this card to show my progression to it. Then what happens though here is that for the other cards that are in between these presence values, I'm going to exhaust a card. I'm going to have some sort of fatigue. And this card will be set aside. Now, this isn't discarded. It's like a special area where it's not quite discarded, but I can't necessarily get that into my hand. Now, there are other things I can do with a type of special type of resting or soothing where I can recover those cards. But what's going to happen is as I'm trying to do things and sort of explore areas and sort of interact with some specific cards, I'm going to have more things that are in my way, and it's going to be more costly for me to do these things, these key type of actions. In addition to that, if I'm actually playing cards, they'll be actually discarded out directly. Once I discard a card, it's gone. I can't use it. I can't regain it. And so this really comes down to really what you're trying to do. During a day, the day will end when I need to draw a card and I can't. Or there's other conditions I might receive a certain amount of wounds. If I receive 3 wounds, then I have to call it a day. Lastly, too, I have a point where you'll have some individuals that may be out in the environment. And so if they're attacked and they receive amount of damage that would necessarily wipe them out, then basically you'll read an entry for them and they'll probably instruct you to end the day immediately. So as this game plays out in a round is that you're going to go ahead and spend your turn trying to do certain things. And it'll get to a point where you're using up a certain amount of energy and you just sort of need to stop. And you'll say, I'm going to go ahead and rest and just sort of reset. At that point there, you'll get your energy back. And then you're going to be drawing more path cards, one for each ranger. That's slowly going to add more and more to the environment. So there'll be more things that'll be along the way. They'll be out in a greater region. And they'll have more things that are closer to you. And so it'll become more and more difficult for doing key things. In this case here, I really want to try to explore this as much as possible, but I've got more things in the way. It's going to cause more fatigue for me. And I'm going to be basically running through my deck and not be able to do what I need to do. So this case here, that's when you're trying to figure out, what am I going to do with these creatures? How am I going to interact with them? I can try to soothe them and, basically interact with them to try to utilize my spirit and try to calm the animal and maybe get them to sort of skedaddle and get out of the way. Or I could try to avoid them and maybe just exhaust them so that way they're not in play. They're not being able to interact with the environment, and they're not necessarily being an impediment to me trying to do anything else in exploring out a region. And so that's what a key thing you're trying to work with and trying to do. But before refreshing cards, you have that point of just saying, okay, I'm done with this region. I've gone ahead and I've explored this. I've gone over this threshold. I've got this point where I've used up everything. I've played out the cards that I've got in my hand. I'm ready to go. And I'm just going to decide I'm done. I don't want to interact with this stuff anymore. I've gone through and talked to the people I wanted to talk to. I've sort of seen enough of this area. I think I've got a good view of that. I want to travel elsewhere. At which point then you're going to have your location and pick another location that's going to be nearby. Let's say I can go to Boulder Field. And again, you're going to create another deck. You're going to get out another location, which would be specifically Boulder Field. You'll create another encounter deck, but the cards that you've used and discarded stay out, as well as your fatigue. And so this sort of represents, it's the deck of cards works as, it's a dual action here. One is the things that you can do, and that's always cool, and you always want to do that. But as you're doing these things, it's slowly sort of burning through what you can do in a full game day. And I think that's sort of the key crux of this, is what you're really trying to do is interact with as much as you can and try to squeeze out as much as possible that you're able to work with the environment and do certain things before it gets to this point where you're just exhausted. You just can't carry on. You can't do anything. And it might be possible to make maybe 2 or 3 locations in a day and really sort of explore as much as you possibly can. But, there's always that threat that, as you're coming across more and more difficult things, you need to commit more cards to either remove them from play or exhaust them or get around them. Or, if you want to interact with something directly with a certain location to sort of explore a little bit more, then it's just going to require more and more effort to do. Now, one thing I wanted to point out, this is just a key thing that really makes this game sort of sing, is when you play a challenge card, you're going to resolve the challenge if it's either success or failure. And then on top of that, there's going to be a specific attribute that you're going to look through the cards in play that you're interacting with and see if something happens. So I have this little mountain symbol. I'm going to look through and see from here what happens when this mountain symbol plays. And so for some aspects here, there's some type of being in play. If there's prey that's in play, then it'll interact with this weed and eat up this weed and add some damage to it. And so that's really the cool thing that you're sort of figuring out, is that, you know, as you're making checks, you're always going to have this ability that pops up. It'll be one of three things. I'm going to show you an example here. It'll be one of these three symbols here. And these things then are going to show like what happens for the actual creatures and actual locations that you have in play. Also, even the weather can interact in here. You know, if it's midday sun, if I pop this out there, I can encounter fatigue and it's just so hot. So I'm actually going to lose a card here. And maybe I can get it back if I can find some shade and sort of rest, but maybe not. And so that, to me, really throws a monkey wrench in your plans, what you're wanting to go through. You know, obviously is that random check that, you know, you may just draw a card that could just dump out a stat check that you're looking at. That's a possibility, but really it's these other values here, that match up to what's going on in the environment. And so it gets a key thing here that, you know what, I can't draw this symbol here. It's, you know, it causes predator to be active. And it's in my space, so it's going to probably attack me. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to maybe bypass it. I'm just going to try to make it use an awareness check to sort of skirt around it and maybe just get some distance between it so that it won't be active when I make a check later. And to me, this is a really engaging way of how you make out these checks and what you're trying to do, because every time you're drawing through a card, yes, you're checking, there's a little bit of a randomness thrown in there, but really it's these effects in here and how they interact with stuff that's in play that makes it quite interesting. And that's an aspect of this game I like. You're not going to have a lot of different encounter cards. Once you go through woods, there's only about 12 cards, so it sort of becomes rather common, the cards that you see again. You're going to sort of expect, oh, there's this really big monster in there. There's these certain type of wolves running around here. You know, these are pretty cool, that these little berries I could possibly eat, but, you know, it's an impediment to get through. And you really just start to learn the terrain and what's available out there and how they interact with certain types of symbols, and sort of predict, you know, what you're going to be doing, how you're going to handle these things, and sort of tailor your deck maybe as you slowly get some advancement and some certain rewards and switching cards out to sort of handle that. And that's what I like. There's some randomness in there, but the more that you explore this valley, the more that you go through this, you're going to sort of start to learn, going through this terrain, oh, it's really dangerous. I got to make sure I'm prepared. As opposed to some other terrain, well, you know, it might be a little bit later in the day. I've built up some fatigue, but I'm thinking, you know, I'm pretty well adept at probably getting through these woods. I think I can handle what they throw at me, so it's not going to be so bad. I'm just going to keep pushing and going on. Now, what are you trying to do in this game? Well, in this aspect here, as I said, this really comes down to what I feel it's more like a choose your adventure type of game. And as you come across certain locations or certain individuals, they're going to direct you to go through this book here and find a specific passage that you're going to read. And there'll be like certain things that'll be going on. So if you're helping out this individual, if you're on this certain mission right now, this is what they'll do. If it's the first time you've met them and you haven't interacted with them, they're going to read you another little passage. And this is going to sort of guide you through things to sort of do. Now, I feel what's different in this game is, unlike, I dare say, Arkham Horror, you have a set encounter and you complete that encounter and you have hard choices. Do you do this or this? If you pass this test, if you were successful, this is the outcome. If you weren't successful, this is the outcome. And here it's a little more nebulous. Sometimes you're going to have that. They may ask you, hey, do you want to deliver these biscuits? You know, yes or no. And if you say no, you're not going to do it, well, then you don't. And then the story sort of goes on. If you choose to pick that as a mission, then they sort of guide you. Okay, well, this, go to this area, go to this location on this map and interact with these people and, give them these biscuits. Buried in this too is the dialogue that you'll have with certain individuals. So you'll read a passage and they might say, I was exploring out in this area and I saw something that was, looked really interesting. And it's not a clear direction to go someplace. You're not given a mission. It's just a tidbit of some information that you sort of like, mark off in your head and think, maybe I'll go out there and sort of see what this person was talking about. And that's just sort of buried away in here. And this is what I mentioned. It's quite interesting how this game sort of evolves and runs around. At the heart of it is you're going to have a location, and you need to explore this location up to a certain amount of point, which will allow you then to go further out in the map and look at other locations. And you've got a day, you've got 30 days to go through it. So during the day, you're trying to squeeze out as much as you can, interact with as many people as you can, try to, go through as many possible locations to the point where you just can't sustain it and you have to end your day. But as you're doing these things, you're really going to start interacting with these people and slowly start to accrue a little bit more of this overarching story in that. And so there's little breadcrumbs that are sort of dribbled about, and it's your choice if you want to follow through with those or not. And as you complete more and more missions, you start to get dragged into this larger and larger story. It really helps build this narrative experience. And in one aspect of this, that's what it's interesting, I feel, as war games go, it's like 5 parsecs from home, or maybe even like 5 leagues of the borderlands, where you really don't have a story. You sort of play out a mission, and those outcome of that mission really sort of drives back the narration. This person got injured, and then they got sidelined, and then they were sort of despondent. And these are the things I'm rolling up to see what happened to that crew member. And then you can sort of retroactively go back to, in this mission, then, I got shot up, and this person sort of got some PTSD because of that. And that's why they wouldn't go on to the next mission. You sort of like go back and sort of tell that story. And this sort of has that feel a little bit. It can be rather listless, and you're very directionless of what you're going to be doing. Where do you go? What do you do? I'm just going to explore one location, interact with a few things. And, I don't know. What do I do? Well, that's the key, is that you really sort of have to envelop yourself in this world and allow yourself to slowly just spend the time and let the story build, and then sort of choose what you want to do. And that sort of dictates how this happens. And in this aspect, because I said, you've got 30 days, there's so many locations, there's so many things that can happen. There's only so much that you can do. And can be little blips that can happen where you can just get, horrible spin of luck that you're drawing out cards and you get these chained events that just, wipe out your guy. They get so much injuries. They just, they have to rest and call it a day. And, there's these choices too. Do you work with this person or not? Do you help this person or no? You have that choice of doing that. That really, I think, adds a lot of replay to this game. The idea that there's so much here to explore. There's so many different individuals to have. There's a chance that maybe you'll come across some person, but maybe not. How you go about those things and how you interact with that really helps tell that whole story. And that aspect, I feel it's quite interesting how this plays out. It's much different from maybe some more of your typical deck building games that are sort of set around like a campaign and how they play out. And I really appreciate how that's through. And at the heart of this too is I love this key mechanism that you have here, that you're going to make a skill check. You need to have a certain amount of energy to do that. You're going to have a little bit of variability, but then you're going to throw in this symbol here and sort of see what happens, how these things interact. If things spiral out of control, or maybe you've got this problem with this bramble that's in your way and it's impeding you, but this thing actually eats up this bramble and gets rid of this flora. And then, now if I keep checking this, it's going to be easier for me to do because it's gotten rid of this and I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to spend time and resources to try to pick those berries and get them out of the way, or, maybe scare this off. That's an interesting thing that you have. But the heart of it too is this idea is that, yes, if I need to make a check, I can commit skills to those and actually do those. But once I do that, they're gone. I can't use it for the rest of the day. And likewise, if I get fatigue, that also sort of drains out what I can do during the day. And it sort of slowly will make this deck harder and harder for me to go through and use. Because every turn, you're always going to draw a deck. If I keep pushing on, you're always going to be like slowly adding more cards to your hand. Now, there's ways that things that you can interact. There might be special abilities or equipment that you have that can sort of get this back into your hand and use them. But for the most part, once you've used them, you've pretty much used that and not been able to get those cards back. And that's what you started balancing out, is this: you're trying to squeeze out as much as you can during the day. You're trying to do as much as you possibly can. But as more and more things as you go through, more locations you see, you're just playing these cards and discarding things, and it's just whittling this deck down. And you're just getting more and more fatigue. And it gets to the point where you just need to draw a card and you can't. And you say, okay, we've got to stop. I just can't do anything more. And so whatever progress I've made, I might have to say, well, I can't do this now. So we've got to put everything up and basically start a next day and just start all over again. And so it has a little bit of that push your luck ability with it. So final thoughts: Earthborne Ranger, I like it. Be forewarned that this is a game that's going to fill out for a long campaign. I think that you can get through, probably maybe 2, maybe 3 locations a session, like a game day. It breaks down, then sets up pretty quickly. So you could probably play maybe a couple of days in an evening. But it's going to take a while for you to get through this campaign. The other thing I'll say too is that it's a deck construction game, so you're going to make your deck. And at this aspect too, that there's really small things that you can do. You'll complete some missions, you'll get some rewards, and that will slowly allow you to modify this deck. But it's not as flexible, I think, maybe let's say as Arkham Horror, where you get like a bunch of experience and then you can switch those out and add those cards to your deck, and you can really change out your deck quite a bit from mission to mission. And here it's a little bit more of a slower change in your deck construction. So really, once you make up your deck, that's pretty much what you're going to be using for most of the game. And so that aspect is a little bit different. And what I would encourage you to do is just, it's a cooperative game. Screw it. Just have some fun. And if you find a couple cards in there like you just can't use, it's just horrible, just made a bad choice, just pull them out and put in some other cards and just have fun. What I'm going to recommend is give a shout out to a different YouTube channel. It's Table for One. They have a wonderful little series on Earthborne Rangers, and they have especially one about deck building and some considerations for that, and maybe how to sort of set up your deck initially. And I really appreciate the philosophy they have for that. They give an excellent explanation of how to set up your deck and, really go in that a little bit more detail. I recommend just definitely checking that out. The other thing I feel with this rulebook is, this is odd saying it, but at the beginning of this, they talk about the designer's thoughts. And I think this encapsulates really the game pretty well. And it's odd that I would dare say you probably want to read this first before really getting into the game. Because it's the idea that it can really just convey what this game's about, what you're trying to do, what is it trying to show in the experience of play. And you can get the rulebook online, it's free. I recommend reading that. And honestly, just get an idea for what they're going for. And really the concept is they said, look, you know what, there's this world, and we just want you to explore it and sort of go through the nooks and crannies and just sort of see who you come across and the neat locations and unique things that are at a certain areas, and sort of seeing the flora and fauna and how they interact with each other as the days progress through and as you're moving through these areas. And that's really what the game sort of encompasses about. And then the story will slowly build from there. It's a different experience than I would dare say with Marvel Champions, or even more of a campaign game like Arkham Horror, where you have a set encounter. I have to defeat this creature, or I have to explore this area, and then something unfolds and I can do something else. It's very sort of regimented. This is what I do, and once I've done that, then the scenario's over and the story progresses. And here, it's more, we're in this area, and you got to spend time to explore this area and get over this threshold so you can go somewhere else. But as you're doing that, you're interacting with the things that are in this encounter deck, And hopefully you'll come across an individual that will allow you to interact with them and maybe progress that story a little bit more. Or maybe they'll give you a little bit of tidbit of some dialogue there and say, oh, well, maybe you want to check this area out. Or, if you're looking for this thing, you should go here. And then you think through the map, well, if it's down over here, how do I plan out my route? Where do I need to go next? And as you're doing that, more and more things can come up where they say, hey, we help deliver these biscuits for me. Well, I can't bother. I really want to go over here. Or say, yes, I'm going to do that. I'll get a little sidetracked here. And it just adds more and more story to this as you're going, and the potential of getting some more rewards and allowing you to just change out this deck a little bit more. And there I find this a different experience. And as deck construction goes, it's a fun way of designing out these decks. It's not overtly complicated, but you do have to require to think through is, what are the cards I can have to allow me to do certain checks and sort of figure out how do I handle these things? Do I spend a lot more in compassion maybe and be able to find these predators and be able to basically get them beat up enough in awareness and such to maybe sort of guide them out of the area? Or do I want to have, this odd, rare type of equipment or items that might actually do some damage to something? And then I think about, if they're interacting with certain things, if I have prey out here, can I move this card away from me and get it somewhere else, maybe in another area where if I have this problem and this predator goes after this prey, that's what it'll do, rather than being in my area where it'll attack me because there's nothing else around. And so seeing how this interaction goes through and how they interact with each other, it's an interesting point in how you sort of tackle these type of challenges. So I like the game. And it's different. And I think, though, that you need to go in with your eyes wide open to sort of what it's trying to have you do. What is the experience that it's trying to give you? It may not be for everybody, though. And I totally get that. It says it's a deck construction game, and it's there, but I think that there's so many unknowns that you have. A lot of it can be a little difficult to be able to tailor it the way you want. And then lastly, I think it's really sort of front-loaded, what your deck construction is. You have few and far chances between creating your deck and at the end of near the game as you're playing through it to really alter this deck much. And so in that aspect there, it's not quite as maybe deep as something you might have, let's say, for Arkham Horror. I think especially for like Marvel Champions, you've got one scenario, you pound it out, you make a deck, it's sort of fun. This is what you do. You've got that campaign where you can add a couple more cards to it and go through that way, and that's sort of fun. But I think it maybe the deck building in this aspect fits more with Marvel Champions in the way that you're sort of front loaded. You sort of make up your deck and think about like what you sort of want to do. But there's so many variables involved with that. It's sort of hard to predict a deck that can do everything. And that can be a challenge, but maybe it's just the card pool I have, and maybe it's just the way I'm looking at the game right now. It's hard for me to just jump in and say, yeah, it's for sure like a really strong deck construction game. But I like it. And I think that if you are thinking about the game, definitely download the rule book and then read this little section here, this introduction, and sort of get the idea of like, this is what they're going for. And I think if you have that idea in your head, this is what they're trying to emulate in play, this type of experience, it should click with you, but it may not. And so I think that will give you a good idea, for the heart of this is it's a card game, it's a board game, you're making checks over certain thresholds with a little bit of a randomizer in it. Whether you're successful or if you fail, there can be interesting outcomes because of this check that you make and how cards play out. But it just may not be enough for you. It just may not be enough guidance for you to say, like in a game night, sitting down, this is what I want to do. Because I really do feel of other games I've gotten, even for Arkham Horror, yes, there's a longer campaign, but you can say like tonight we're playing this scenario. We're doing this and we're experiencing this. And here it's so much more effusive. And you're going towards a 30-day experience here. And these are not, mind you, 30 play days. You're going to get through, I think, quite a bit of story before the end of this one. But this is what you're gearing towards. So I think that you have to be prepared to really just delve deep into this and experience the story that it offers. And, maybe that's for you. And maybe you can get a group of folks together, or you can play enough solo games to do that, but maybe not. But in the heart of it, I really enjoy Earthborne Rangers. I appreciate what they've done. It's a different kind of game, and hopefully you'll find this interesting enough to pick it up and maybe give it a whirl.